Okay, welcome everyone to SICS seminar series, the October 2024 session today. And before I start, I would like to begin with acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, and Gundungurra and Biripai peoples of Australia, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which Charles III's campuses are located, and pay respect to their elders, both past and present. So, all right, I'm going to admit someone with a phone number. So I think this is the external. All right. Welcome, whoever that is. I can't see your name there, but also welcome to everyone, colleagues in CSU. I will be guiding through and keep up with timing today. My name is Anita Devi. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm a lecturer at CSU in the Information Studies area. Now, today we have excellent presentation, excellent presenter. And if I'm clicking away, that's because I'm admitting people in. The title of today's presentation is School and Public Library Collaboration or Not. So it's kind of a like exciting title as well. And we have great presenters in the invite. You probably have seen there are 4. So there are Mary, Kasey, Kay, and Krystal, who are part of this team. So these are the members of the teacher librarianship team in the School of Information and Communication Studies. Today, two of the 4 presenters are here. We have Kay and Kasey. So Kasey Garrison is a senior lecturer and coordinator of the Children's Librarianship Specialization. And Kasey's research centers around school libraries and social justice and diversity issues in youth literature. And we have Kay Oddone, who's a lecturer and course director for the Masters of Education, Teacher Librarianship, and Kay's research focuses on information and digital literacies, personal learning networks, and of course, teacher librarianship. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over the microphone to either Kasey or Kay.
Yes, me, sorry. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. And I do want to say, and thank you, Anita, for that fab welcome. An intro. Yeah, so we are presenting this presentation at the International Association of School Librarianship. So that's the IASL conference. They're doing a virtual conference this year, and so that's at the end of October. So just, I think, Saturday week. Although I got a little confused, and I actually had to send a recording in this week, so I thought that this forum would be great practice for the conference, but it turns out the conference was great practice for presenting to you guys. So thank you so much for coming. And you're not going to be the guinea pigs, as I originally thought. You're the main event. So, but I do have a few contextual stuff or contextual things included in the presentation that I might include if I miss it in the script, or maybe I'll just include it and see if you're paying attention. Yes, so thanks so much for coming to our presentation. I'm Kasey, so I'm going to be talking. And at the conference, I was actually representing Mary, Krystal, and Kay. But Kay is kind enough to come in on her day off to join us, so she might pipe in as well as we go along. Okay, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where I live and work. So that's in Gadigal and Birrabirragal country. Mary Carroll, who's also a collaborator on this project, she works and lives in Nam in Melbourne. And Kay and Krystal are both in Meanjin, which is also known as Brisbane. And yeah, you guys would be very familiar with these pictures from Wagga Wagga campus, but I always like to share these kinds of things with people abroad to show them that the rumors are true. There are deadly animals like snakes and magpies and kangaroos on our campus. Okay, and again, I am just one of 4 researchers involved in this study. Krystal, Kay, and Mary are the lovely humans on the right. And then Monique, I realized that you are here and I should have okayed this with you. But Monique is our our muse, our Tinkerbell there in the middle, not involved in this research particularly, but also another researcher from CSU. And the four of us, as as Anita mentioned, we teach in the Masters of Education Teacher Librarianship program. I'm also the Children's Librarianship Specialization Coordinator. So we are really interested in this idea of how school libraries and public libraries are working together. Okay, and as many of you would know, but as our IASL colleagues wouldn't, Mary Carroll is a librarian historian, and since she led this project, we really have to talk a bit about the history of the relationship between public and school libraries in Australia first. Always the history first with Mary. Now, I'll start with some foundational reports. So the Munn Pitt Report in 1935. So that was funded by the ACER and the Carnegie Corporation of New York. So some American funding there. And then Sarah Fenwick School and Children's Libraries in Australia, a report to the children's libraries in 1966. So both of those reports advocated for a collaborative role for the two types of libraries, understanding that each has a unique vision that they've developed for the services that they deliver, expectations of the qualifications needed for those who deliver those services, and that shared mission of providing children's services, whether in school or in the public library. So then in 2002, Alan Bundy did a survey of collaborative practices between Australian public and school libraries to really see what was happening. So this report provided insight into the level of interaction between both looked at inhibitors and promoters of the interactions, understandings of the role of the school and public library in relation to children and youth, and the level of understanding that these two sectors or these two types of libraries have of each other and their roles at that time. So it concluded that, quote, school and public libraries in Australia in 2001 have a sense of that common endeavor and that many are making an effort to extend their interaction to that end. So basically, Bundy gave us that foundation, and we decided that we wanted to update his research and see if that sense of common endeavor that he noted has continued now into about 22 years later. Okay, so with that, our first three research questions were really about the data we collected from our study, and then the last two were more of a comparison with Bundy's study. So since we have some limited time today, we actually don't, but the IASL conference we did. But we're just going to talk about these first three research questions, and then our paper, which we are working on and will hopefully get published soon, that will address all of the questions and do that comparison with Bundy. So we were interested in examples of partnerships and collaborations, the perceptions of each type of library about the need to collaborate and provide services to children as well. Okay, so our methodology. So again, we replicated that study that Bundy did 20 years ago. So we sent that survey to professional organizations for school and public libraries across Australia. So that was via listservs, some of those national, state, local associations. And we do understand that that means we're going to only capture certain people active in those groups, and we might miss some others that are active in other groups or perhaps doing other things, but we thought this would be the best way to recruit participants. So we did two separate surveys, one for the public librarians and one for the teacher librarians, just like Bundy did. And each of those had about 13 to 14 questions with some quantitative and qualitative options, as well as demographics and some more library specific questions. Well, I'll get into that in the next slide. Okay, so here's some demographics about our participants. We had almost the same exact number of respondents for each, which was interesting. As far as geography goes, I don't have to explain to you how our state and territory system works here, but you can see that the public library respondents came from all the state and territories except the ACT. And then the school library respondents did include the ACT, but they did not include Tasmania, South Australia, and the Northern Territory, which was included by the public library respondents. But again, as we know here, Victoria, Queensland, and New South Wales are the most populated states in Australia. So we feel that we have a good representation having high numbers of participants in those states. Now, I also was, I might mention this here because I'm not sure if everyone who's not familiar with school libraries knows, but in this presentation, I was going to talk a little bit about some of the different challenges that libraries and schools face across Australia. So for example, the New South Wales is the only state or territory to mandate a qualified teacher librarian in every school. Now, that's not very well defined, and Kay, pipe in if I'm saying anything misleading or wrong, but that could mean that they have a teacher librarian that has a 0.1 role in the library and then a 0.9 role teaching other subjects. Now, since a fully qualified teacher librarian has both the education degree, so a bachelor's in, maybe education or teaching or something like that, and then they have their master's degree with the library qualifications, or they could have 2 bachelors, but basically a properly qualified teacher librarian has those dual qualifications. But we do know anecdotally that New South Wales does have really strong teacher librarian numbers, while some of the other states do not. And particularly, we know that Western Australia, although we had some great responses here, that they actually have pretty low numbers, despite still being really active in their professional school library association for the state.
I can jump in here and just say that also the fact that the states don't mandate the teacher librarian means that it's basically up to the individual school principal as to whether or not they want to hire a qualified teacher librarian. A lot of schools in Australia will have a library, but they may be managed by a library technician, or sometimes, rarely, someone with a librarianship qualification and not a teaching qualification. And obviously, while they do an amazing job, it's not ideal because the benefits of having that dual qualified person leading the library really are quite significant. And research has shown that it has a significant impact on student achievement, regardless of socioeconomic level. So that's why we're constantly advocating for that mandate, and a mandate that's actually implemented in full, so it's not a teacher librarian present in the school but not necessarily in the library, as Kasey said.
Yes, thanks for that, Kay. And then public libraries will face different challenges with funding issues as well, but I won't talk any more detail about them. But I will say that the qualitative responses to our survey did bring some of those issues to light in both libraries. So we'll talk about that later. Okay, library locations. So you can see the public libraries are represented in blue here, and the school libraries are represented in green. So most of the school libraries were from outer suburban or inner suburban areas, followed by regional cities, with our public librarians being a bit more balanced here, as shown in the blue. Many more remote and rural public librarians than school librarians, which is maybe not super surprising either.
Perhaps also, reflective of the smaller the school, if there's a choice, the less likely the principal might decide to employ a teacher librarian because they have misunderstandings about the value of the role.
And again, they have that dual qualification. I think one of our respondents said, or maybe this was in another forum where someone said, the principal said that the teachers would likely want to have smaller class numbers than a teacher librarian. So, insinuating that putting that teacher librarian in the classroom meant smaller class numbers. I don't know if that's true, but that's what a principal told one of our TLs. Okay, so this slide looks at the type of library within the public libraries and then the type of school. So as you can see, most of our respondents came from a public library branch. Our schools are relatively balanced on being non-government or government. And with that note that I made earlier about the New South Wales having that mandate in schools, that would apply to the government schools. So the non-government schools can pretty much do what they want. Although again, anecdotally, we know that a lot of independent or a lot of government/independent schools do have teacher librarians, and they have some really thriving libraries with lots of staff and massive budgets. Most of our school library respondents were from the secondary high school level, which was interesting because we didn't target that in our recruitment or anything. We did also record job titles here, but they were pretty diverse, so I'm not going to report on those here, although you guys would probably understand them better than maybe some of our international attendants would. Okay, so now getting more into the data. So this graph shows the reported current level of interaction as noted by school library respondents with public libraries, again, being shown in green, or no, excuse me, school libraries respondents with public libraries shown in green, and then the public library respondents with school libraries shown in blue. So you can see the public library respondents noted higher levels of interaction here than the school library respondents, but about 26% of those also said that it varies by school. And again, looking at or thinking back about our differences in the state and territories, I wonder if something might be at play there with the data. We haven't been able to go into too much detail with the statistical stuff yet, but that is to be done. Okay, so here's some examples of interactions. Again, they did seem to vary greatly. So some are doing dual promotion. For example, the school library noting to students to visit the public library for different resources, or maybe promoting some of the programming happening in public libraries as well. Sometimes the school and public libraries shared author visits or celebrations on important days like Book Week. I don't need to explain to you what that is. And also interesting, there were some notes about early childhood literacy programs and support for secondary students studying for their, their final big test at the end of the year, the HSC, and here in New South Wales, but I know called other things in other states. And of course, for anyone who's ever worked in a library, there's always that swapping of misdirected items where a student has returned a public library book to the school library and vice versa. Okay, now this graph is showing how that interaction has changed across the last 5 years. And you can see that both types of librarians said it has mostly stayed about the same or reduced. While many didn't know, and being new to the role or maybe not around for the past 5 years, and that was actually higher than we had expected. Some of the qualitative responses gave a bit more details on that. I've only been in this role for 6 months, so I don't know that kind of thing. Yes, so some of the factors identified as impacting interaction, and some of these are positive factors as well as negative factors. Not surprisingly, time, staffing, and money are noted, as well as proactive efforts by both libraries, noted by public librarians twice as much here as the school librarians noted. And the school librarians also noted that bottom one, that there's no need for that interaction. Also showing that lack of interest, and that came up in our qualitative responses as well. That the school librarians just don't see why they would interact with the public librarians, and then often the public librarians saying they've been trying to reach the school librarians with no success. And that was just a few responses, not everyone, but some of the responses from the school librarians also alluded to being in highly affluent non-government schools that had great budgets, so there was no need for them to use anything with the public library or suggest to their patrons that was needed. So yeah, I think that noting those qualitative responses about the non-government schools, we also need to go back to those responses and see if we can pull out some particular things related to those. Here's a few more details on the factors impacting the interaction over the past 5 years. again, not surprising, the impact of COVID. That was a significant point made by the public librarians with the school librarians. The public librarians also noted that the pressure on teachers to, quote, fit another thing in, which I thought was very empathetic of them. I will also say here that some of the school library respondents in the qualitative responses noted relationships with the state library and nearby university libraries. So maybe they're not having that relationship with public libraries, but they are still engaging in partnerships with other libraries.
Can I just jump in there and say that
yes.
that is perhaps a sign of the fact that state and university libraries are perhaps better known for their provision of databases, and a lot of secondary school libraries will say, we can't afford to offer the databases you need to their students, but you can sign up and access the databases through this state and university libraries, whereas public libraries are just not as well known for that. It's more of a leisure reading.
Yep, good point, Kay. And then respondents on both sides noted geographic issues in reaching the libraries physically. And then I think, oh, yep, maybe the next one. Oh, yeah, and also I will say on that too, that the public librarian respondents also seemed a bit torn in helping some of the schools in their council area, but not helping all. So that's not something I had really considered before, but was a factor for them. And then we also had this question, one of our final questions, which I don't believe that Bundy had, but we thought it would be interesting to see about personal visits and use of the library. Now, maybe the public librarians wouldn't be visiting a school library for public or for personal use so much, but the school librarians obviously have a right to use the public library. And we were surprised that this there were so many no answers there. And for example, one school library respondent noted, quote, I have no need to visit the public library as I work in a library. So yeah, we just thought that was interesting.
And we wondered whether or not they were thinking about physically visiting the library, but they were still borrowing ebooks and audiobooks from the library, and it just didn't occur to them, which you would hope librarians would recognize, but potentially that might have been another thing.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, Kay, the different collections, school libraries don't generally stock, even secondary school libraries don't stock many items for adults. So yeah, I mean, I guess school librarians read a lot of youth literature anyway. So anyway, yeah, so these are some of the implications of this research and then future directions where we want to take it. So unsurprisingly, lack of time and money, always an issue for teachers and librarians. But what did surprise us was that lack of understanding around the dual role of each library and how they can share with each other, especially government schools that are theoretically sharing government funding. Although I did have a note here about how some non-government schools in Australia do get still do get funding from the government. But in thinking about this lack of understanding, we also went back to some of the standards and guidelines for our profession. So this document was developed by the Australian Public Library Alliance and ALIA, the Australian Library and Information Association, and it's aimed for public libraries. So it does mention partnerships and outreach specifically with schools here. Now, the school library equivalent of these standards and guidelines does not mention these types of partnerships with public libraries. And even in our curriculum as a university, teaching both future and current public and school libraries, we realize that we are lacking a bit on that too. There's some things that we promote in our classes, but I think it's something that we need to add and that we can do much better and discuss more explicitly with our students, especially because our Masters of Education Teacher Librarianship graduates are qualified to work in any type of library and not just a school library. And some of the qualitative responses from people did note, I used to be a school librarian, now I'm a public librarian, that kind of thing. So they are taking advantage of those dual qualifications. So the next steps for the data, we want to look more closely at the responses from the joint use library, because the ones where a public library is actually located in the school and open to the whole community and they share resources. So we're thinking that might be a good model for further collaboration. So yeah, we want to look at that a bit further as well. And then of course, as some of our main research questions and the impetus for this study was really making comparisons with Bundy's study from 2002. That's a big thing that we need to do next. But I will say that despite limited interactions and understandings between these two types of libraries, both serving Australian youth, many of our survey respondents still had a positive tone for that shared mission and values of both libraries. And I think that gives some promise for the future. As one school library respondent noted here, every library is important, while the public library respondent noted that we all just want, quote, the best outcome for our children. So I will end there. And yeah, this QR code has our references. Kay made that. Thanks, Kay. But yeah, thanks so much for coming and listening. And yeah, feel free to contact us with any questions. Well, no, we can talk questions right now. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Kasey. I think there are already a couple of questions in the chat that Kay has been diligently responding to them.
Teamwork.
Well done to you two. Is there any questions from anyone here? Annie, you have your hand up. But I think you need to unmute yourself first.
Thanks. Yep. No, very interesting. Great talk. Great subject. So I'm interested, obviously, on the facilities side of things, particularly with this joint use. Now, because I've come across a little bit this on what I've been reading about library facilities, and there can be, I believe, some just practical issues about security and after hours and car parking and gates being open on weekends or weekdays and these sorts of things. But then I think the general push is towards more joint use everything. It's not just GLAM, but it's going to be GLAM plus GLAMS or something with schools on the end. So no, I just think it's a really interesting area. And I wondered if you'd thought a bit more about how you're going to approach this next step, or are you just sort of starting out on that?
Yeah, just starting out. I think we need to go back to those specific people that answered that question. I forget how many that was, and then we also we presented on this a few months ago at ALIA, which was in South Australia, and the school library community there was really upset that they weren't represented, because there are quite a few of those shared facilities in South Australia. So that might be another thing that we need to do. I did just scroll through the participant list to see, I see Holly's here, Holly Godfrey, one of our fabulous sessionals, and she's works at a joint use library, or I know she took a little trip to Alaska for a bit. Maybe you can speak on that, Holly. How they work.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask a question as well. Because as you say, my school library is located in it's one of three college libraries in the public system here in Canberra, which are joint use. But we have, in the 8 to 9 years I've been there, it's been really very much like a parallel function. I always think about toddlers with parallel play, like we're kind of each doing our own thing, and we have lunch in the same room, which actually is a small but significant way of building bridges, between the two staffs. But there's been a change in the leadership structure, like a very significant change in the public library sector here in Canberra. And so we're actually at my school about to soon, before Christmas, have a kind of a strategic sharing circle moment where we all talk about what our strategic goals are and how maybe we can align them. So I feel a sense of optimism right now that there could be like a new era coming of more collaboration. But my question was, how many, I'm interested in that next step about the joint use libraries, and how many respondents you had, even just an estimate, and if there were like concrete examples given? Maybe I can chat to you about this offline too, but how much of a data set did you get from other joint use libraries?
Well, it looks like from the data we had 5%, so not too many. That would have only been, I guess, five. Gosh, my stats, 5 to 6. But yeah, maybe something like doing some interviews with people working in joint use libraries might be a way to get more detailed data instead of just looking at those responses.
Yeah, well, these, like I said, there's 3 here in Canberra, and I know I can confirm that what you just said about South Australia. My understanding is that almost all of their rural communities, the small towns, are all joint use. And so, but you know, so we're sort of more like I don't know if you'd call Canberra urban, but like semi-urban, and versus that rural. All of that kind of factors into with size of community and all those things. But and I don't know about the rest of the country, how many there are.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, thanks.
Thanks for the confirmation too.
Thanks, Sally. There are a couple of comments there as well,
Yeah.
including extension of the study as suggested by Philip there. So again, Kay has been responding to the questions in the chat. Is anyone who's Andrew, for example, is asking on the chat, would you like to go on mute if you want to explain a bit further of what you're suggesting there, or that should suffice? I don't know, I can't see you. Or anyone else have any question or comment?
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Andrew, about the Northern Territory Library and Archives.
Andrew, I can see that you're talking, but we can't hear you, unfortunately. Yeah, you're still on mute. Sorry. Oh, now you're on mute now, but perhaps try again. Is it that red button, little red button on your
I think Andrew, you probably need to put on your head.
Yeah, or your.
Oh, it's there. Oh, sorry.
No.
Or maybe sometimes there is that little button that you've
on the headset
pressed or something. Because that happened to me all the time. No. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Thanks though, Andrew, for that note. Yep. Sorry, Tina. Go ahead.
I think it's a very interesting project. Thanks, Kasey, Kay, and team. I wonder, because we have very, tight budget, this is a situation facing every public in the library sector, or, school library, etc. So what's the any implications from your study, in terms of budget planning or, funding to support library sector?
I can respond a little bit. I think that there's a couple of different things that we can draw upon. The first is that for us as in the TL team, it points to great opportunity for us to raise the need for collaboration with public libraries and the benefits that school libraries can gain from those collaborations, which ultimately may impact the budget because of, as I said, schools don't always have the money to provide some of the resources. And if you can, blend across it, it makes it more effective for the students to access. But also I think that it will be really useful for basing like a foundation sort of level of knowledge about the way that they work together to inform that whole idea of the co-located libraries and those types of things, because we can sort of, it's like a snapshot of where we're at the moment, when we don't have a lot of that particular model, particularly in some states it just doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. So that, because I think leveraging resourcing in that way is going to probably become a focus in the future, but there are tricky things to manage like student safety and things like that. So it's it might be a snapshot that can be used as a foundation for that further study into co-located libraries.
Thanks, Kay.
Okay.
Can I ask another question? Yeah. Did anything come up with regard to like terms and conditions from, you know, databases or ebooks providers, that kind of thing, because that my understanding is that can be a blocker too, in terms of like what they're signing up for or paying for through the public library, and how they may or may not be like allowed to share that with a school. Did that come up?
No one mentioned anything
no.
that I'm aware of, but I am aware that can be, yeah, a situation. And in many cases, the school library staff will say, get your parents to take you down and you know, sign up as a citizen of this particular region or council area for the public libraries. They can't do it en masse through the school, because kids might live in other council areas and things like that. I was actually just thinking about that this morning with university databases, and when schools team up to provide access to their students for university databases, and what the university needs to do in order to increase that number of people accessing the database. I was thinking about that this morning and something else. So yeah.
For what it's worth, when we enrolled my daughter in school in Anchorage earlier this year, as part of the school enrollment forms, I could sign something that automatically would give her a public library card.
Wow, that would be
cool.
They're well
That's
organized.
Yeah. Yeah, I think none of our questions, I mean, we did ask, we wanted to keep it quite short, so people, you know, you always 5-minute survey, but we didn't ask those more directed questions, Holly, so maybe that would be a good one for some interviews, or to better understand that. But yeah, it was funny when we looked and we thought, oh, why aren't they seeing out? Why aren't the school librarians seeing a need for the collaboration? Then we were like, oh crap, we don't have it in our curriculum really. So that's not good of us. So
research informed curriculum it will
be when
we
there we go.
But I think also schools have changed so much. I remember, like, it was a long time ago now, but when I was in high school, we used to all walk down as a class to the local public library, walk down the hill and spend the afternoon in the local public library reading. And you just couldn't do that now without a lot of paperwork and a lot of, I don't remember even having a permission slip or anything go home. We all just walked our way down there with the teacher, obviously, but things like that just don't happen as easily anymore. So I think that there are probably a few extra hurdles nowadays than even in 2002 when Bundy did his research.
Yeah, that was definitely noted. Even people saying, despite our public library being across the street, it's a busy street, and so we can't, you know, the paperwork was, makes it challenging. Any other questions?
Oh, look, I was just going to sort of contribute to kind of back that up, that it's I've worked as a library assistant in a school, and then as a public librarian in the public library. And I always felt like, ideally I wanted to kind of get those two, I thought, I know everybody at each place, I want to get these two to mesh. But in the school system, they have their, they would say, oh, look, our excursions, we've blocked them out ahead, like terms in advance, because we've organised transport and permission notes, and it's got to correspond to the curriculum, etc. But whereas in public libraries there was a sense of kind of going a little bit roster to roster, and being able to get that to merge, and to do something that was planned ahead was like, it was really tricky. It was so much more difficult than you would expect it to be. So I thought there's, things that just aren't happening there, but little hurdles, I suppose, in a sense, but really interesting.
And thanks, Alex. Wow, you've been around the library gamut. You've done the gamut.
I've done one of each. So yeah, so I've only done one school, one public, and one uni, so that's it. So haven't really been around that much.
It'd be great to get your perspective though, Alex, because you have that multiple perspectives across the three context.
Yeah.
Any other comment? Yeah, sorry.
Oh no,
just
the
one
other
more
thing I was
comment,
thinking, sorry. Oh, sorry, Holly, you go. Oh, look, the only thing I was going to say is that the university, like our library here, doesn't offer our licensed databases to high school students or to the community. It's not something that we're able to kind of stretch the budget. So that so when our school students, when the high school students use the library, it's for the print resources and for the spaces. But unfortunately, not the databases. I think that would be a great lure, but it's not something that we do.
I just had a thought from working with the advocacy for school libraries. I can recall now speaking to people who, while I totally agree with the idea that it makes sense to share resources, it's all, especially with public schools, they're all primarily the government's responsibility, and that just makes sense. It can also be used as a way to undercut the school library, because I have heard that sort of excuse used that they're going to cut the public library because, they can just use sorry, did I say that wrong? They're going to cut the school library because the students can just use the public library instead. So it was this weird, obviously not the library people making that case, but like a decision maker concerned about being efficient with resources was using that line of thinking.
Coming back also to that misunderstanding of the role of the teacher librarian, and seeing libraries as a place where resources are accessed, and full stop, that's it. So as long as they can access the resources, they're getting the library services, when really they'd be missing out if that was the case.
That's right. And the point about needing parents to take them down there, I think, is a really important one. There's a lot of assumptions made in thinking that everybody can use the public library. They just can't. I always made the case when I was having advocacy conversations that the school library is actually the only library that all children are guaranteed to have access to, like without sort of a facilitator.
Yeah, I can give examples of using my as parents the perspective. My two kids, they because they are currently in the the Catholic school, in primary school in Bathurst. So the younger one, they organize the excursion to the Bathurst, the public library. So they're very excited, about using the public library, and get to be more about the understanding the programs, the resources available in the local library. And back to South Australia in Adelaide, I remember my older one, they asked because every year during the National Indigenous Reconciliation Week, so they all draw these, any artworks. Then all these artworks are exhibited in the local public library next to the school, because they are in North Adelaide, so they have North Adelaide Public Library, and so community library. So their artworks are exhibited, and the parents are all invited to visit those community libraries. So the kids are very proud of their work. I think this is such nice connections between the school and or school library and the public libraries.
That's great, Tina.
Annie is also mentioned in the chat, Kasey. Working with children permit or visitors, that's also a factor. So
for visitors, wow. Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, most of our public library students most of the public librarians would have that, I would imagine, but I'm not sure the visitors. I mean, you don't need one to go to they're all in the shops together, right? Like, I don't know. But you're right. I think it could be quite complicated. I remember when I used to work at a school in the US, and when they have the voting in the school, so on the days that the public would come in to vote in the school, it was always a bit like, and finally they just decided to cancel school that day.
Happy kids then.
Yeah.
Any other question or comments? Come on, well, we got these two great speakers. Ken, Kasey, I connect them every day because I work with them, but with questions. No?
But you have our email, so feel free to email us. And
Yes.
and again, a big thank you to Mary and Krystal, not here,
Yes.
but actually they were even kind of leading the project. So
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for them. Yes. And to Kasey for doing such a great job today.
no, thank you, Kay.
Well, I'm just going to thank everyone, the speakers who are not here and here today, but also everyone who attends today. As usual, the recording of this session will be available on our YouTube, school YouTube channel. So you're more than welcome to rewatch. And you do have contact details of Kasey and Kay. In case you have any question after we close this session today, stay tuned for the next, I think we still have one more seminar session next month. So stay tuned to hear from either me or Jane and get a calendar invite or look at what's new announcement closer to the date. Thanks, everyone. And I'd like to close today's meeting. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Great to see you all.